Hi everybody, just wanted to say hello and welcome. My name is Rachel and I'm the Adult and Community Program Manager here at the JCC. Thank you all for coming out, and I want to welcome Lisa. It's been a pleasure to work with her to put this event on, so I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate your kind introduction, and it's been fun to work on this with you too. And I also want to thank Amy Tobin, the CEO here at the JCC of the East Bay, who is the one who extended the invitation to me to speak today. And I also want to thank Dominic the Indomitable, who's taking video today. And I also want to acknowledge my husband, Mark, who really has been my sounding board for many years and is a main source of support to me in this challenging work that I do. And thank you all for being here. So I'm here today to talk about Celebrating Brit Shalom, which is the first book ever written specifically for Jewish families questioning and opting out of circumcision. To write the book, my co-author Rebecca Wald and I created 3 Brit Shalom ceremonies, Brit Shalom being Hebrew for Covenant of Peace. We also included background information, advice to parents, and original music written by my son Reuben, who's sitting right here, to accompany the ceremonies. And we constructed the ceremonies so that they could be either family-led or rabbi-led. Our intent was, and is, to enable families who opt out of circumcision to transform skipping something into a positive spiritual act affirming connection with Judaism and Jewish life. Later on, I'll be reading from the book, but I'd like to take this opportunity to explore why Jewish families are making this choice, and also why the phenomenon isn't being discussed more openly within mainstream Judaism. So here's some quick background. In Judaism, circumcision represents the covenant or agreement between God and Abraham, and by extension between God and the Jewish people. In Genesis 15 and 17, God promises to stand with us and protect us and make us numerous. In exchange, we're commanded to circumcise our infant sons. Though various covenants are referred to in the Hebrew Bible, when we hear about the covenant, we think of circumcision. In fact, does anyone know what bris means? Anyone? Rabbi covenant. Very nice. I was waiting for the rabbi to answer.
Off duty.
You're off duty. Oh, off duty. No definitions. Okay. And I'm going to come back to covenant a little later. So how many Jewish parents today are choosing not to circumcise? We don't know, but the number is growing. When I first started writing articles questioning circumcision nearly 30 years ago, only a handful of us in the Jewish community were talking about it, let alone opting out. And Tina here is one of the people that I knew way back then. Now, Rebecca Wald and I are selling a small but steady stream of our books every month. And when we set up a table for Celebrating Brit Shalom in the exhibition hall at the most recent Union for Reform Judaism Biennial Conference, which is the major conference for Reform rabbis and congregational leaders, we got enthusiastic comments like, "I'm so glad you're here," and "It's about time we talked about this," from some attendees, that is, not exactly all. Meanwhile, the website Beyond the Bris, which Rebecca Wald founded in 2010, remains the go-to site for Jews questioning circumcision. Since its inception, Beyond the Bris has had hundreds of thousands of hits from visitors across the globe. There's also another website just for Jewish parents who are opting out of circumcision and seeking officiants for Brit Shalom ceremonies. So this is a growing trend. Now, partly it's because the overall rate of infant circumcision in the U.S. has dropped. According to a 2013 report from the Centers for Disease Control, 65% of newborn males were circumcised in 1981. By 2007, it had dropped to about 55%, and it's significantly lower in the West. It's not surprising that these declining numbers would include Jewish families, And by all appearances, the trend away from circumcision will continue in the general population and among Jews. Many parents today in America are skeptical of the health benefits ascribed to circumcision. They don't buy into the characterization of the normal foreskin as a birth defect in need of surgical removal. Circumcision is, after all, elective surgery on healthy tissue with no presenting medical condition. This not only strikes some parents as senseless, it also flies in the face of medical convention, which generally regards surgery as a last resort, not as a preventive measure. While the possible health benefits of circumcision are often discussed, many people are unaware of its drawbacks. Most notably, the foreskin is a natural, functional, erogenous part of the body. Let me repeat that. Pathologists have determined from examining foreskin tissue that it is erogenous in nature. This information alone is giving pause to savvy parents. My husband and I are longtime members of Temple Sinai, a vibrant, progressive Reform synagogue in Oakland with around 950 member households and a prize-winning preschool. A couple of years ago, a Temple board member, who was also a Temple Sinai preschool mom, approached me at the synagogue. She told me she regretted having had her son circumcised. Being a circumcision regret mom myself, I nodded in support. Then she dropped a stunning piece of news. Was I aware, she asked, that half the boys at our Temple preschool aren't circumcised? I responded with cool professionalism. What? How could it be true? But then later, another preschool mom confirmed the estimate. Of course, we can't extrapolate national trends from one progressive institution located in a liberal bubble. Still, Temple Sinai Preschool is a Jewish program teaching Jewish values and observing Jewish traditions. 70% of its families are actively affiliated with the synagogue. Even if half the boys is an exaggeration or an anomaly of that particular class, the fact that parents at the preschool of a major Reform congregation perceive intact genitals as a mainstream choice is noteworthy in and of itself. Now, at this point, some of you may be saying, wait a minute, aren't there limits to how much change we can accept as a culture and as a tradition? We're facing assimilation and declining affiliation rates. Aren't there more important issues for the Jewish community to address than circumcision? Besides, circumcision has always been seen as the primary emblem of Jewish identity. If such an essential commandment is now considered optional, what's left? The reality is that whether anyone likes it or not, circumcision is no longer a given in the Jewish community. What I think we need to be asking is, should non-circumcising families be welcomed? And if the answer is yes, should the welcome be open? Let's go back for a moment to the Abrahamic covenant. I'd like to propose that there are other kinds of covenants, other promises that a parent may view as a higher obligation than circumcision. For example, the implicit covenant to protect one's child. Jewish parents may be instinctively reluctant to subject an infant to pain and trauma on such a vulnerable part of his body. They may view circumcision as a decision their son should make for himself when he's older. Or they may be following Rabbi Hillel's summarization of Torah while standing on one foot. That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. Whatever the reasons, I believe that in questioning this practice, such parents are expressing their best selves. Too often, they've been ridiculed, lectured, judged, and or steamrollered into compliance. I think we should instead recognize and honor the best of each person and assure them that their authentic selves are welcome. That's the kind of inclusion I'd like to see added. Here in the East Bay, the Jewish Federation's Family Engagement Officer, Leora Brosby, who serves as a kind of concierge of Jewish resources, told me that circumcision is one of the topics about which she fields the most calls. She talked with me about the idea that there are the phone calls she gets, and then there are all the ones she doesn't get. In other words, for every member of our community who reaches out for support or information, she has to assume there are many others who need support but don't pick up the phone. How many Jewish and interfaith families are struggling with the circumcision decision and don't reach out? More to the point, how many opt out of circumcision and then make the assumption that they're not welcome in institutional Judaism? I'd like to share some interesting conversations I've had, either in person or via email, with various rabbis from the Reform and other progressive movements across the country, of Judaism across the country. I've done many dozens of such interviews, either formally or informally over the years, as well as talking with conservative and Orthodox rabbis. When I've asked Reform rabbis whether non-circumcising families are welcome at their congregations, virtually all of them indicate that these families are in fact welcome. Yet, when I've perused the websites of these same congregations, I've found no mention of families choosing not to circumcise, even if the site offers a clear message of inclusion to LGBTQI Jews, Jews by choice, interfaith families, multi-ethnic Jews, and so on. Occasionally on a synagogue website, I've run across language like, "We offer baby naming ceremonies for both boys and girls." For young families struggling with the circumcision decision, or trying to find out whether they'd be welcome if they decided not to circumcise, this kind of vagueness isn't helpful. That is, a parent seeing "we offer baby naming ceremonies for both boys and girls" might well conclude that a hospital circumcision is expected even if a traditional bris is not. Unclear messaging is not the way to meet this challenge. The pattern that has emerged recently in the Reform movement bears a striking resemblance, in fact, to the military's now outmoded policy regarding gays in service. For example, in response to my question as to whether non-circumcising families were welcome, several congregational rabbis said things like, "We don't check at the door." One rabbi responded in an email, "Don't ask, don't tell," adding the word "grin" in parentheses afterwards. The casual levity of this response shocked me, especially since that particular rabbi is openly gay and knows clearly the cringeworthy history of "don't ask, don't tell." I asked another Reform rabbi whether he'd officiated at Brit Shalom ceremonies for non-circumcising families. He paused, then replied, "I'm not sure." I said, "What do you mean you're not sure?" "Well," he answered, "I have a feeling I have done that. Yes, I'm pretty sure I didn't ask." In other words, he felt the only thing he could do in the situation was to try to avoid embarrassing the family or families. But can we untangle this intentional not noticing? What exactly is shameful about a family making the ritual decision that reflects their true spirituality, especially in the context of Reform Judaism, whose core tenet regarding Jewish observance is choice based on knowledge? Rabbis have also told me, the issue never comes up. Again, I'm reminded of Leora Brosby's awareness of the calls we get and then the calls we don't get. We cannot conclude circumcision is a non-issue based on "it's never come up" when the topic is so highly emotionally charged that parents are reluctant to have the conversation. And it's not just parents who are skittish, it's also rabbis. During the Reform Judaism Biennial Conference I mentioned, a congregational leader approached us at our booth. She wasn't there for herself, she remarked. She was asking for a friend. No, I'm kidding. She wasn't there for herself. Her rabbi had sent her to find out what we were all about and to collect any materials we were giving away. Why the emissary? Apparently, the rabbi didn't want to be seen at our table. How many others avoided our booth because even though they were curious, they didn't want to be perceived as being interested in or sympathetic to our cause? Now, I'm going to use plural pronouns here to ensure anonymity, the necessity of which illustrates what we're dealing with. I am acquainted with a congregational rabbi in the Reform movement who did not circumcise their own son. I want to repeat what I just said. I know a Reform rabbi who opted out of circumcision in their own family. When I first talked with this rabbi and asked why they'd made that decision, they answered, "Because I don't think cutting a child's genitals is a good way to welcome him into the world." They went on to describe their decision as not secret but private, possibly a distinction without a difference, but something I took to mean please be thoughtful and respect my privacy, or maybe even, please don't out me. This rabbi attended the conference. While we were there, we found out about another congregational rabbi in the Reform movement with a son or sons they had decided not to circumcise. And apparently, this second rabbi visited us at our exhibit table and had a conversation with us, but even in the safety of our booth, with all its intact friendly messaging, this rabbi did not come out to us. Instead, they spoke with us and left. It was only afterwards, in talking with the first non-circumcising rabbi, that we realized we had in fact met and talked with the second one. Like the first rabbi, this second rabbi is someone with a pulpit, someone who's enough a part of the establishment that they attended a mainstream rabbinical conference. Both during and after the conference, I asked the first rabbi to please have the second rabbi contact us so we could talk. 18 months later, it still hasn't happened. I don't know whether the first rabbi was trying to protect the second one and never asked, or the second rabbi wanted to protect their identity from us, even with our reputation for with our respect for anonymity. The point is, this is the kind of fear we're living with. Now, I can certainly understand why these two congregational rabbis aren't eager to call attention to their child's genitals while living in the fishbowl of pulpit Judaism. But it doesn't help other Jewish parents facing pressure and anxiety about this life cycle choice. If even rabbis are afraid to come out about their personal sense of this ritual, how are young parents facing this decision supposed to feel it's okay, indeed profoundly necessary, for them to be spiritually genuine? Because if we don't have spiritual authenticity as we face the future, what do we really have? I want to tell you one last story that came from a congregational rabbi in the Reform movement, married to another clergy member, Rabbi or Cantor, I forget which, who shared with us that she and her husband were both against circumcision, but they had gone through with circumcisions of their own sons because, she explained, they were both afraid for their jobs if they opted out. The idea that these lovely Jewish professionals were under such pressure to ignore their inner Hillel should make all of us think twice about what we want for our community. The stakes are high. Trepidation leads to isolation. Based on the lack of explicit messages of inclusion, non-circumcising families may assume that their decision means they're not welcome and preemptively decide against synagogue affiliation, along with Jewish summer camp, bar mitzvah training, teen trips to Israel, and so on. Aren't we looking to attract young families who will participate thoughtfully and passionately in Jewish life? It seems senseless to put a roadblock where a welcome mat should be. What I'm advocating for here is not just tolerance of people's ritual decisions. It's more than that. I think we have to let young families know that their genuine selves are welcome, indeed crucial to us as a community, if we are to remain spiritually vital and relevant. What the fight over Don't Ask, Don't Tell has taught us is that imposed privacy is really imposed shame. Should we include these families because it's nicer to do, because it's kinder? Yes. But we should also do it because in embracing the diversity of Jewish identification, observance, and experience, we're helping to build a vibrant Jewish community that recognizes the best in us and values it. Thank you.